This is Joe Cole.
This is Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and you're listening to the London is Blue podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the London is Blue podcast, guys. I'm Nick, fourth choice host of this episode here, joined again by Abdullah and Jessy for our Arsenal match review for the Chelsea women's team. So there's a lot going on, obviously, at the beginning of the season. The FAWSL got off to a flying start this weekend, and so this is the first official Chelsea women's match review of the season. There is a lot to go over, obviously, with the result and the team news and all that kind of stuff. But we are going to start with just a quick overview of what you'll hear on the show today, and then dive into it straight away because there's a lot to get into. First, we're going to discuss Chelsea's loss to Arsenal and some key points that might have triggered that result. We're going to see where Chelsea might have struggled tactically today and how Arsenal, potentially capitalized on that new formation. And then I think assess kind of where this leaves Chelsea moving forward for the rest of the season. We know margins are pretty tight in this league, so there's a lot to kind of cover there as to how we project. First, a quick note from Tom Gary, who covers the FAWSL. It's Arsenal's first home WSL victory over Chelsea for 8 years. For 8 years. That's quite remarkable when you consider both sides' pedigree in the English women's game. I mean, Jessy, you're nodding and smiling like that's insane, isn't it?
Yeah, it's madness. I couldn't believe it when I saw Tom put that stat out because it gave me a little boost after the game because I was like, well, I guess after 8 years, maybe you have to give something to them.
Probably due for one after 8 years, huh?
Exactly.
I mean, it does just show, though, Abdullah. I mean, 8 years is an insane amount of time considering Arsenal have won the league in the last 8 years. That they haven't beaten Chelsea at home is quite telling.
It's crazy, and it just shows the strength of Chelsea's away record at the same time, and the fact that they've been able to beat them away from home, for 8 years. It's crazy, and I guess you get you get the odd result every now and then. You see Mikel Arteta getting a couple of wins in the last couple of seasons, but we all know that's a fluke result. So I guess Arsenal would do one, and with a new manager coming in, I guess that's the change they needed to get a win.
I will say the men losing away to Arsenal feels a lot worse than this does today, given where Arsenal are at. But look, we're going to dive into the patented three-word match review, often imitated, never duplicated. This is an area where we get to describe our feelings and thoughts in 3 words. So I'm going to toss it over to Abdullah to start us off with our 3-word episode review. Where are we at, man?
For me, it's Erin Cuthbert arrived. I mean, I know Chelsea lost the game, but for me, I've been calling out and I've been screaming and I've been shouting, and I think you'll hear a lot from me about it in this episode. But Erin Cuthbert finally starts a game, and she shows the qualities that kind of I think what Chelsea were missing for the last season or so, with her aggressiveness and just kind of being everywhere and versatility. So for me, it was while it was a loss, I think that was one of the few positives in terms of her showing everybody that she's still there to fight for a place.
Jessy?
Yeah, Beth Mead Basting for me. She ran the show today. I tweeted earlier saying I felt like Tobin Heath's arrival at Arsenal had really focused her mind, because I don't think I've ever seen Beth Mead play like that, and she really ran our defence ragged, sadly.
That's kind of where I leave it, which is title challenge challenged. Obviously Chelsea haven't lost a lot of matches in the last 2.5 years in the FAWSL. So the fact that you start off the season with a loss is tough, especially to a fellow contender for the title. And we did talk at length in our season preview that Arsenal are a different outfit. They've recruited pretty well this season. They might not be the pushovers that they have been in the last couple of years for Chelsea, and they certainly proved that today. New system, new manager, players kind of playing at a different level, given that they've already had to play Champions League qualifying, and so they have a couple more competitive matches under their belt than Chelsea do at this point. So I think that's where we're going to start. I mean, obviously the result, Arsenal 3, Chelsea 2, goals from Miedema and Beth Mead on the double, although one of those we will talk about later on, which was not a goal if you take into account the rules. Erin Cuthbert and Pernilla Harder both score for Chelsea. Some top line stats here, just to get the conversation flowing, you guys. Chelsea, 15 shots to Arsenal's 9, 4 shots on target to Arsenal's 6, which is pretty disappointing, I think, from a shots on target perspective. Chelsea had 60% of the possession away from home, absolutely dominant in that area. Outpassed them, more pass accuracy, a couple more fouls, to be fair. One less yellow card, 2-1 there for Arsenal. And then 1 offside to Arsenal's 2 offsides. So there's something to talk about there as well. But I guess I'll throw it to Abdullah. I mean, looking at these stats for the match, I don't think these stats show that Chelsea were down for most of the game.
Yeah, it's strange, right? I mean, they almost had not exactly double the amount of shots, but they had a lot more shots, 15 shots. I think, yeah, like you said, I think the on target was something that was a little bit disappointing. Arsenal, obviously, in that regard, were a lot more clinical. 6 on target, of which 3 were scored, and Chelsea, of which, okay, fine, 4 on target, of which 2 were scored. But to give yourself a better chance in a high-scoring game, you need to get more on target. I think. And again, this is one of those times when maybe possession does kind of show what was happening, because let's be real, for large portions of the game, Chelsea were dominant. They were sitting in Arsenal's half, hitting away at their goal, passing around, getting shots away. There was a lot of blocks in there, so I guess that played a part in it. But it just comes down to the fact that Chelsea were dominant in terms of possession. They were in Arsenal's half, but then Arsenal were just clinical on the counterattack, and they just took their chances when it came to them, And I guess credit to them for taking those chances, right?
Is there anything in here from a stats perspective, Jessy, before we get into the personnel that stands out to you?
I mean, I think it speaks a lot to game state, these stats. Like Arsenal obviously went 1-0 up. You had quite early on, you had Chelsea then pushing for the rest of the first half, like looking good. Arsenal then got a pretty quick fire double at the start of the second half, and Chelsea then pushed on for the last 30 minutes. So I think this is like quite a good case of where you can say stats don't really tell the whole story, because I think from watching the game, it didn't really feel like a dominant thing, and especially those kind of last 15 minutes. I think by the end of the game, I counted Arsenal had about 4 players on the pitch you could recognise as centre backs. So I think that kind of stuff skews it, obviously.
Oh, it's also worth noting too that it was a relatively warm day at the Emirates, right? And important to note that this game was played at the Emirates. This was, it's a really great thing to see more women's matches in the biggest venues possible. I like that. The field did look huge compared to what we're used to, maybe with a Kings Meadow type of viewing situation. And yeah, I mean, the heat, I think, kind of took its toll on the Arsenal team, so they had to make a few injury subs, maybe a little bit of cramping here and there happening. But let's get into the personnel, Abdullah. I want you to kind of go through the lineups and the subs, and then maybe we can talk about the system here and kind of see maybe what went right and what maybe didn't.
Sure thing. So obviously in goal we had Ann-Katrin Berger. I think, and Chelsea were playing basically a 3-4-3 formation with Jess Carter, Millie Bright, and Magda Eriksson as your 3 centre backs. You had Neem Charles and actually Guro Wrighton starting as your wing backs on the left and right. Leupolz and G held up the double pivot in the middle, and then you had a front 3 of Erin Cuthbert, Bethany England, and Pernilla Harder. And then on the bench, you had Misovic, Anik Nuven, Sophie Ingle, Frank Kirby, Jesse Fleming, Sam Kerr, Drew Spence, Jonna Anderson, and your George Fox. So, I mean, very strong bench, a lot of strength and depth there. And, the system 3-4-3, we've seen it a lot in preseason, but, I wasn't expecting it to come out in the first game of the season, considering, we're so used to seeing them playing a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2. So it was interesting to see. And, I guess we'll go into a lot more, a lot more depth now. But yeah, just a surprise from the outset.
Well, I think, is that maybe where we want to start, is just, was it a gamble? Was it too much of a gamble for you, Jessy, to start in this new formation against a team that you've had, if you're Emma Hayes, you've had a lot of success against with a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3 over the years? And is it simply that the personnel due to all of the Olympic activity over the summer, this was kind of the best personnel available to you that was fully fit, or is it something else?
I feel like there's a couple of things there. I think firstly, in hindsight, it feels like an odd choice. That's because it didn't really work. I think my initial thoughts when they started playing it was, it kind of makes sense. You can look at it on the Chelsea men's team. When your team has a lot of defensive frailties and you feel like you've got the centre backs available, as Emma Hayes clearly feels like she does, switching to a three at the back is often seen as a good way of shoring up your defence. Unfortunately, the way it played out, and I think to give credit to them, Arsenal did this really well, and other teams wouldn't have done this as well. They really moved Chelsea centre-backs around, and that's, I think, why it looked so open. I think the Olympics obviously is a bit of a factor, but we've got this, ongoing. Mielda's out injured. For whatever reason, Emma Hayes has clearly decided that she just does not trust John Anderson, or maybe that's unfair for the context of this game, but obviously, Magda Eriksson is playing. She played more minutes at the Olympics than John Anderson, and she started today. So I'm sure Jonna could have started it if Hayes had really, really wanted her to. And so I think it's not necessarily the system that felt weird to me, but maybe some of the personnel deployed. Wrighton ahead of Anderson, even Carter ahead of Nuven. I know Carter's had a pretty impressive preseason, has obviously been around longer, but all of these kind of things didn't really feel like they worked. Equally, Niamh Charles, this is like an unfamiliar position for her. We've seen her play at right back, we've seen her play at right wing, but like the wing back role is a very different thing, and maybe that's really, like, to me, that's what it felt specifically like I was watching, that neither wing back was a wing back, and that was really where it all started to fall apart.
It's an incredibly interesting point, and something that we know from watching the Chelsea men, right? That these are specialist roles. That you can't. We got lucky when we converted Victor Moses into a right wing back under Antonio Conte, right? That it worked out, but that is Marcus Alonso's position. Like, that's the only position that he's like really qualified to play at top level. And he's a specialist, right? And so you even saw someone like Ben Chilwell for the men last year really struggle to pick up wingback for a long time, because it's just a whole different position and role. Factor in that you're taking two, I think, more attacking-minded players, Abdullah, and putting them in a position where they have to cover a lot of ground, track back, and understand that, Miedema and Mead were going to try and stretch. This was kind of an interesting position for Charles and Wrighton to be in, right?
I 100% agree. I think, and just kind of going on Jesse's point, neither are wingbacks, and like we said, Nick, it's such a specialist position. I think people, sometimes underestimate the position itself, because you think, oh, okay, cool, you can just chuck in a winger and let them be and let them do their thing. Where on the other hand, just to kind of go back on your men's point, look at Callum Hudson-Odoi. He had a couple of decent games, but he's still struggling to get used to the wing-back position and kind of get minutes there. And so there are obvious pros and cons. Like, I think we've seen Wrighton's played there a couple of times now, but not enough to be able to be like, all right, she's a natural there. So I think when you've got someone like Jon Anderson on the bench, yes, she has a left back, and yes, she had her issues, and Emma doesn't seem to trust her, but why do you not, if you don't trust her defensively and positionally, this is the one position that your left back, who's better going forward and kind of at least knows the position well, you can cover for her deficiencies at the back and positionally, because at least then when she does go forward, she gives you something, but she understands the positioning that's required. She may not be great at it, but she understands the positioning. And on the other points of Jessy was saying about playing Jess Carter in that third centre back, if you want to play two quick wingbacks, I get in, they're very attacking. I would then go and bring in a Nick Nguyen, who's a little bit faster, a little bit more athletic, and can cover that space. And like you said, if Miedema and Mead are going to be using those channels and kind of playing in there, and there's going to be a lot of rotations in that area, you need pace. And that's the one thing we talked about. Eriksson isn't the quickest. We've seen her lose a foot race and a half in this game. Bright isn't that quick. And Carter looked a little bit slow as well when she's up against like a Mead or something. So you need at least one of your players to be quick, because if your wing backs are high up out of position in a transition, which is where the counterattacks came from, at least one of them needs to be there with pace. And I think that was clearly what was missing. And possibly highlighted defensive deficiencies more than what they actually could have been if there was someone quicker at the back.
We will dive deeper into the tactical side, because I think that's going to be, the majority of the conversation today is how I'm going to set up the team and how we move forward. I think just one more quick note on personnel. I mean, obviously there are a lot of, the substitutes that came on were Olympics bound for the most part, and so maybe are not fully fit. So this is not maybe Chelsea's strongest squad that we're going to see all year that started. But one that I did want to call out, I think from a positional standpoint, is the midfield pivot did not work initially. I mean, this was a really tough day for Loopholes and for G, I think. Any thoughts on if a midfield combination that may actually produce something? Because I think they got overwhelmed pretty easily.
I mean, I will say that I think I felt like Kim Little did a really good man marking job on Loopholtz, and Kim Little's a fantastic player, so that's something you have to deal with. I thought Ji So-yeon had a great game, and I think Chelsea did the best they could trying to deal with that, but I think ultimately what everyone is kind of looking to see is Jessie Fleming kind of playing that role, because I think even when you saw her come on, it just feels like she's so much more dynamic at points. The way she can pick up and move the ball and most importantly recover. And I just felt like watching Loopholtz today, it was just so easy to mark her out the game. As I say, Kim Little was a great player, but it shouldn't be that easy. She was really struggling to, show for the ball. Miedema was doing a great bit of like shadow play, kind of standing between Bright and Eriksson, stopping them getting those easy balls out to Loopholtz. But it also felt like Loopholtz didn't know where to go, when normally she might, if we were playing a 4 at the back, drop deeper to like drop in between the centre backs and pick up the ball from there. It just really felt like she didn't understand where she fitted in within the system, which is surprising because she didn't go to the Olympics and she has been at Cobham for the entire pre-season. So yeah, I think that was a really strange one. She looked totally adrift, and there were points where Chelsea had basically decided to drop G back to pick up the ball and push Loopholtz up, and that is just not the way round you want to be doing that.
Well, we're going to continue with the tactical discussion in a second. We're going to take a quick ad break. Thanks to sponsors for supporting the show. We'll be right back. A quick couple of reminders. We're going to do a little housekeeping in the middle of the episode, not at the beginning. We're going to be covering this team every week. So if there's a match, you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be a review coming up right after that. So it'll likely be on the Tuesday of every week, obviously, with the men on international break that's dropping on the Monday. So you're getting a little Monday action from the women's team. Please, just as a reminder, rate and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us get discovered. And if you want to throw in a special shout to the Chelsea women's team, we'll know that you're listening to this particular episode, and that'd be pretty cool. We also would encourage you to join us on Patreon. We have a wonderful Chelsea women's community that's built up in our Discord. Tons of activity, even though the match started at 6:30 a.m. my time today. That was happening, and so the Discord was on fire. There's a ton of support there. And then a quick reminder on Patreon that we are going to have our Ted Lasso rewatch episodes back this week. We took a small break last week due to scheduling. So, okay, cool. Let's get into the tactical breakdown. There's, like we were kind of saying about the midfield, and I think that's really where I want to start, the conversation again. Jessy, Loopholes got marked out of the game, was not nearly as dynamic as we have come to expect from her. It did not seem as if, to me, that there was a strong link up between the defense and the midfield, regardless of who was dropping back, and I think that's a massive problem. It got better when Ingle came in. For me, and I think is a credit to her for playing a bit of a different role and maybe a little bit more of a defined role in that way. Is that what this team needs in this formation? Do we need someone who's going to, essentially drop back, be a little bit more of a defensive-minded player? Because I think where I saw it go wrong today is G obviously belongs in an advanced position. That's where she makes her hay. Loopholes wants to get forward, I think, as much as she can, but I think oftentimes they were caught out doing different things and maybe didn't have the relationship built up. Is that what you saw, or did you see something different?
I think the main thing that I felt looking at it was, every team wants their patterns of play when they're building out from the back. And obviously when you're switching to a new formation, that's something new you have to figure out. And to me, I don't know whether I would want to, pin it all on Leupolz, particularly, although I definitely think she struggled. But to me, it just felt like Chelsea's one pattern of play was the ball to Jess Carter, and then Jess Carter was either going to try and ping it up to Erin Cuthbert on the right wing or put it out to Niamh Charles. And that was it. That was all there was down the right. And actually, I thought where you saw Chelsea really get joy was later on in the match when they started playing a lot quicker out towards Guru Wrighton on the left. But it felt like in that first half, the first 60 minutes especially, all they had was like going down this right-hand channel. And it was really easy for Arsenal to therefore figure that out and break it down. I think that's always going to be tricky when you're moving into a new formation, but you would really hope that's also something you've planned for. And it really surprised me, actually, that there wasn't more differentiation going on there at all. Having someone play in that more defined defensive role, yeah, but and I think Ingle did improve stuff, but I also feel like sometimes Ingle doesn't necessarily offer the same levels of creativity on the ball. So ultimately it's just a toss-up, I think. And it definitely felt like when she was coming on today that was really, damage limitation. It was quite obvious in that sense. So I think my problem with Ingle playing in that role regularly is if you're playing three centre-backs, you shouldn't, I don't think, be looking for a defensive midfielder to then sit in front of you. You really should have your patterns of play sorted out so you can have a more creative, but okay, maybe defensively minded player there, because otherwise I just think you're and in a team so full of attacking talent as Chelsea, you're really wasting space at that point.
So you're looking more for the connector, right? Someone who's going to connect the midfield and be able to advance the ball, I think, which is, you didn't see a whole lot of advancing the ball from midfield today. A lot of it was, like you said, coming from the wings or just kind of route one all the way up top. And that kind of became easy for Arsenal to sit back against too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that was, what Leupolz was obviously in there to do. She was meant to pick the ball up and then pick the pass. And Arsenal just found it really easy to cut her out, And I don't know, I found it quite hard to tell whether that was because Eriksson and Bright were struggling to figure out how to get the ball to her. I was quite surprised how little actually the back three played the ball to each other. We often normally see back threes as a good opportunity to kind of switch the ball across the pitch quite quickly and look to stretch out an opposition team in that way so they don't know where the advanced pass is going to come. But it didn't feel like any of that was even there today.
Well, I think it's a good transition point, Abdullah. Let's talk about the defense and where things didn't exactly go right today. It was kind of clear to me that these three were not very comfortable in this role, that positionally they were not always where they should be. They got pulled out and pulled apart a little bit too much for my tastes, personally. But I think I want you to kind of do the deep dive. Let's talk about what needs to happen moving forward with the back three if they're going to keep this, because it was far too open at the back.
100%. I agree 100%. I think it's a mixture of the fact that it's a new system. But I also think that it almost looked like they didn't exactly trust each other in the system because they don't know how each other's going to play, right? It was almost like, I'll go here, but I don't know if she's going to follow me behind. I don't know where Cost is going to be. And I think there was a lot of that. And obviously knowing the fact that you've got two wingers at wing back, I think that also played a part in them, because they were like, oh, we're going to have to cover it even more. But at the same time, because the midfield double pivot was struggling, they weren't as defensively switched on as we said. Just kind of going back on Jesse's point from the midfield, you don't want someone like an Ingle who's just going to sit in front of defense, right? But you want someone who's dynamic, someone who's defensively minded, and who's switched on and aware, who can sit back and kind of vertically, horizontally move across that defensive third and give you that extra man cover. So someone who's going to be able to pick up the ball, play those connecting passes, but at the same time recognize, all right, I need to be in this spot and can put in a tackle and be dynamic. Obviously, this is where possibly a Jessy Fleming comes in, but we'll get into that later. But I think a lot of it was the fact that because the wingbacks were so attacking, and I think Chelsea expected to have a lot of the ball, which they did, 60% possession. And I think possibly that was the reason behind playing two attack-minded wingbacks, thinking that, all right, cool, we'll have the ball most of the time, so we don't have to worry too much about, what's going on behind us. But then I don't think anybody expected Arsenal to be so clean and so good in transition and so kind of efficient in transition. I mean, that space between where Wrighton and say Ericsson would be and then Carter and Neen Charles would be, I think Arsenal just went, right, we've got to target those spaces, because we know that if we can pick up the ball when Chelsea are in our half, get a couple of quick passes into the final third, we can just use the Miedema's pace and Beth Mead's pace to kind of get into those spaces. And I think that's what happened all the time, and especially in the first half. I mean, Chelsea were just overrun there, and Miedema's goal where she kind of went in and she turned Carter inside and out in that move, and I think she had no clue what was happening, and obviously Miedema scored, and I was kind of worried after that point that they would just keep going back and back and back, and at the same time, I don't see an obvious fix in the wing back, at least on the right side. Like, you probably have to bring Mielda back when she's fit, but who knows when that's going to happen. But then again, I would then have to alter the tactics to say, all right, that Nguyen has to come in. If you're going to persist with 3, I think Nguyen has to come in. I know Hayes gives her signings a year to settle in. They play the odd game, but if you're going to continue with 3, you need to play a natural centre back. And Nguyen is a player that likes kind of, covering in behind in spaces. So she's not going to be aggressive and step forward. While she can do that, you can let a Millie Bright and a Magda Eriksson do it on their side, and at least you have someone with pace kind of covering in the spaces in behind. So I think Arsenal did a really good job transitioning into those channels and kind of taking Chelsea from there. Fine, yes, 1 second goal was offside from Beth Mead, but it was the same sort of deal. Get her into the wings, cut inside, and then shoot and score. So I don't exactly blame Berger for all the goals, but defending was questionable. It looked very, very new. And listen, I think long term, this is the system that's supposed to suit Chelsea. I think this is the one that they should be going forward with. But it needs a couple of additions. It needs a couple of tweaks in terms of specific personnel for it to work perfectly. If you have to go with the current squad, I would then move a couple of players around. I would actually bring Erin Cuthbert or play Jessy Fleming in that second double pivot. I know you lose out on a Leupolz or G, but I would bring in one of those two just to kind of give you the balance in this team. And that helps the defense, because then the defense are like, all right, when we have the ball, we can step out and then maybe we can ping those passes out across and do all that. But, that's kind of where I'm at with this.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll pass to Jessy on this. I think where I was at with the back, I was very frustrated with the back line because these are seasoned pros. I mean, and Millie Bright's my favorite player on the team. I love her to death. She is so impressive to me, but she was all over the place today, playing in the middle, got pulled out quite a bit. Magda looked frustrated and gassed. She played a lot in the Olympics this summer, so that's probably warranted, but was not her normal self. I think passing really struggled on that side in general. And then Carter is, for me, probably not the solution there. And it's not just from hey, you get done by Miedema, which happens to a lot of people, right? That's not necessarily the end of her Chelsea career just because she got scored on by the most prolific goal scorer in the league over the last 5 years. But I think what frustrated me about Carter was that the passing right to left was so slow. It allowed Arsenal to reset, and when they would go on a press, we never really broke that press in any sort of significant way. And that, I think, allowed Arsenal to then just kind of redouble their efforts. So I had issues with every single person in the back line today, which is tough to say because I think they're all great in their own individual rights, but maybe just weren't great in this system.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think Carter was probably the one of the three who impressed me the most. Maybe just because I expect less of her. And, there was a point where I was kind of watching her and I was like, I don't know if she's like crazy or if she's a genius, but like she was the person who was trying to bring the ball out from the back. And at points I was like, this is going to send my heart rate over the edge. But I also did have, respect for that. And it felt like that was like in the first half, especially almost all we were building from was, Carter getting pressed and being quite neat with her footwork to move out from that. Yeah, the Magda and Millie, though, I agree. I thought they both I thought lots of the team looked very unfit, to be honest. I thought lots of them looked absolutely knackered. And surprising players as well. Like, I thought Niamh Charles looked knackered. I know she had a lot of strapping on her thigh, so maybe she's not fully fit. But, players who you would, didn't play much at all in the Olympics, had time in pre-season. But yeah, watching Beth Mead, kind of run at Magda and Millie, I thought especially, when there were points where Carter got caught out and she was just out position and she was never going to catch up. But, for the third goal, when I was watching Magda go toe-to-toe with Beth, at the point the ball was played, I thought Magda got that ball. And she just didn't get there. Okay, obviously Beth Mead was offside. I couldn't see that in real time. But it kind of felt like it summed up, what was going on for Chelsea there, that you expect Magda and Millie to turn up in these games. And I don't think really either of them did today. And I think maybe I feel defensive for Jess Carter because I kind of thought she was the best of the three. And I think she's sometimes a bit of an easy target. But I thought she was at least trying stuff, which felt like more than could be said for the other two.
Yeah, I would agree on fitness. And frankly, I think the point was made multiple times on the broadcast that Arsenal had played 3 competitive matches already due to Champions League qualifying, early qualifying stages. And so maybe they were a little bit more put together as a unit as well under their new system. A quick and terrible stat to bring up for the whole crew here, because we're just kind of wallowing in self-pity right now. 3, Chelsea are only the third defending Barclays FA WSL champion to lose their opening game of the season after winning the title the previous season. After Arsenal in 2013, they lost to Liverpool 4-0. Ugh. And then Liverpool in 2015, they lost to Sunderland. Unscripted. I would say so.
Can I step back, though?
Sure.
Because, so also from this, neither of those teams, put it that way, went on to win the league. But also Chelsea drew our first game, obviously, last season, and no team had drawn its first game and went on to win the league. So, records are there to be broken.
Bright light. Look at you, Jessy, just injecting positivity into the crew here. Look, I mean, we got to go to the boss, right? I mean, she, I think, typically does not pull punches after results like this. And I think today probably is the same. But I think it's important to note that the offside goal is ridiculous, frankly. We complain about refereeing decisions in the Premier League all the time, and it's today's was egregious even by that standard. The fact that Beth Mead is so clearly leading the entire back line is crazy, and the line judge has to get that right first and foremost. I mean, that's on them, but there has to be some sort of technology brought in that, the league is now so competitive and so dynamic that, this type of decision, as we will talk about later in this episode, could have a huge impact on where the league goes and how, the title is won or lost. So Emma Hayes on Sky News said, we shouldn't accept lower standards in women's football. She wants goal line technology and VAR brought into the WSL, which I think is not only the correct statement to make there, but it also just shows that there's still room for progress, Abdullah, that not there isn't honors even between the men's and women's game in a lot of ways, even though today's game was played at the Emirates, which is where the Arsenal men play. That there still needs to be some improvements made. And hopefully that happens sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think as we, every season that goes past, the league is only getting better. The league is only getting more competitive, and I think we can safely say this season that the top 3 have definitely. There's going to be a lot closer than it has been in the last couple of seasons. Jonas Sandoval, I think, is going to be a good addition to the league overall. Gareth Taylor's really improved his team. We've seen Willie Kirk and Everton just make a bunch of signings that, didn't work out in the first game, but I think it'll come good as they start gelling together. United, great start to the season for them, good performance. So, and then obviously you've got the mid and lower table teams that are, maybe it'll take them a little bit more time to kind of get up to speed. But I think overall, as we get bigger and bigger and more games get played at the men's stadium, the Emirates, Stamford Bridge, the Etihad, et cetera, I think, VAR needs to kind of make its entry. I know it's I believe it's a very expensive thing to get implemented into the smaller stadiums. And I think that comes down to the investment. I don't know. I mean, correct me if you guys know if I'm wrong, but is it the league that invests in it, or is it the clubs that have to invest in it to put it into stadiums?
I believe it's the league. Isn't it, Jessy?
Well, I think the problem with VAR, I guess that's probably a league thing, because you're basically just talking about having a referee elsewhere and having a television screen. So that's not too complicated. But in terms of goal line technology, the problem has traditionally been that is the issue of the ground where it's played at. So that does kind of become a team's problem. And also for lots of these teams in the WSL, they don't own the grounds that they play in. So it's also not necessarily something that they've got even control over doing.
Yeah, I think Hawkeye is still the technology that's used, and it does require like a multi-camera setup, and some stadiums just frankly don't have the infrastructure where you can get the right camera angles in there. I would settle for just getting the video review right, because you could have easily called that back today. If we're talking about this example in particular. So, room to grow. Other comments about the result today. You can't concede 3 and expect to win away from home, noting that each goal came in transition, and that's not good enough. Chelsea got Chelsea'd a little bit today, compared to where we were last year. I mean, this was kind of tough to watch, because a lot of Chelsea's best attacking play last year came on the break and were in transition, and the defense was not prepared for Arsenal to do that. And then a quick note on the process. She says, process. I like the challenge. It's the first game of the season. No one wins the league today. It's a fair point, but I mean, with slim margins, it might be tough to argue that it could have a big impact. I do want to discuss something a little bit positive, though, and that is the play of Erin Cuthbert, who I think was far and away Chelsea's best player on the day. A goal and an assist. So she assisted Pernilla Harder for the second goal. Let's talk about our favorite Scottish firecracker here, guys, and maybe just where she excelled in this kind of front three role. She's been played all over the pitch in her Chelsea career. Started up front, got moved back to be a more traditional winger, and Abdullah's arguing for her to be a defensive midfielder now. So let's talk about her up front and where she had some success today.
I think she was brilliant. I think she was the best player on the pitch for Chelsea. I think she was everywhere. She brought a tenacity. I think up front, where Chelsea like kind of pressing from the front, I think she's the perfect player for that, kind of harassing the centre backs. She didn't give them time to kind of play out and kind of make decisions, which is what I think what I think is required in most games, especially against these bigger teams. And just kind of her overall play, I think, for one, I think her on the ball play was a lot better than I've seen it in the last couple of months, at least of last season when she did play. I think playing in preseason and then kind of coming in and being able to, get this start in the first game gave her confidence. And there's always been an issue on fitness for her, but, she lasted a long, long time, and she pretty much played the whole game. And I think going forward, I mean, even when she got switched to right wing back, almost, I felt like she even took it up a gear there, because it was her cross that got Pernilla Harder's goal, a constant threat in behind. And I think at that point, it wasn't a need to be as defensive. Obviously, the third goal came from a different place. But I mean, I think for me, she's got the qualities to be a very, very important player wherever she plays, and kind of gives this team balance wherever she kind of plays. She plays in defensive midfield, right wing back, right wing as a number 10. And I honestly think she needs to be playing a lot more this season than she did before. She needs to be that player in the big games where Emma brings on and is that tactical weapon, kind of like the Park Ji-sung of Manchester United back in the day, the Ramirez who used to play at right wing in a Champions League semi-final, Barcelona. Bring her in, kind of play her in these positions where teams are not going to expect her to play, but then use her aggressiveness and her ability to be able to harass people and do all that, and then I think that could actually be the difference maker in these small margins, these big games.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily do the hey, this is a men's player comparison thing all year, so I will restrain myself after this one. But she gave me major Mason Mount vibes today. When he plays in that front three, and his primary job is to press, right, which she did brilliantly, I thought, and then also contribute in goal situations, and I think she was just kind of in the right place at the right time for the goal, Jessy, where she was kind of left alone and had a brilliant, just kind of slotted through ball to score the goal. And then I think her assist was the only good cross of the day. There weren't many that found a head. I think there were a couple by Wrighton that just barely missed, or by Harder that barely missed Sam Kerr at the end there. But otherwise it was kind of a tough day from a passing perspective out wide. Maybe talk about her different roles that she can play, because I think, to Abdullah's point, she is flexible. If you need to make some substitutions that are more defensive or more attacking, she can slot in a lot of different places.
Yeah, and I think that's where she struggled at Chelsea, to be honest. I think, we can oftentimes see the versatility kind of kills a player, because when they can play every position, they almost don't nail down one. But yeah, I thought she was fantastic today. I found it particularly satisfactory how much she had the beating of Katie McCabe, on a personal note. And yeah, I thought she always offers, so much. She always just feels like she leaves everything out there. And I never failed to come away from watching her play being incredibly impressed by what she's done. And I do think it's a shame that it's felt like over the past season, at least, there hasn't really been a spot in this side for her. I do actually wonder whether, if the three at the back thing persists, whether she is the more natural right wing back than Charles, or at least the more well-rounded one at this point in time. Although I will shout out Niamh Charles for playing that ball to Erin for that first goal. I thought that was like a really composed moment in what was quite a chaotic circumstance in the box. And yeah, I thought she was just great going forward, because she was just going past players, and I thought her and Ji So-yeon combined incredibly well. The dummy from Ji that leads to that corner for the first goal, but all of that was about Ji and Erin's relationship together. And I thought of all the players who, kind of maybe came into that starting lineup. We haven't even really touched on Beth England, because she didn't really do anything. Of all those players who maybe had the opportunity to prove something today, Erin Cuthbert was the one who by far and away stood out as the person who should play more this season.
Yeah, and actually your mention of that nice dummy move by Ji kind of brings Ji into the discussion here, because I think when she was able to get forward, she was incredibly dangerous. I rue that chance that you just talked about, because I just wanted her to pull the trigger right away, and she waited just a half second too long, and I went out for a corner, unfortunately. But that would have been an epic goal. It would have been amazing. I think, Abdullah, I kind of come down 50-50 on Ji. I don't know how you feel about this. Her in that central midfield area, in kind of a flat midfield, right, where you're playing a double pivot, doesn't exactly allow her to live in the opponent's final third in a kind of back and forth game like today. I think it requires more of her defensively, which isn't, for me, where I want to see her do the business. I think I want her up front, because when she was able to dribble and make smart short passes in the final third, that's where she makes her money. But I was kind of like, I don't really know where you fit unless you play more of a 3-5-2 and you're able to just be that kind of orchestrator in more of a 10 role. Am I wrong?
No. I 100% agree with you. And it's a funny thing. Jessy and I were having a chat about, I think we had an hour-long call a week ago, to last week, a week before, about whole G and how does she fit into this setup, because it's and one of the things that we said was, her and Harder almost want to do the same things, just in different positions, and then they clash. And so one can't go in too much, the other one can't drop in too much, and both want to kind of be in that same zone. So you kind of get stuck there. And I think G playing in a 2 offsets the balance. And I think that's the word I keep repeating. I keep saying that this Chelsea team is lacking a balance. And that's maybe it's 1 or 2 personnel changes away from bringing that in. Yeah, if you switch to a 3-5-2, then you could play G as like this, almost like a free roaming 10 from midfield. But then how do you then fit in Pernille Harder? Maybe you then play her back as a striker as part of the front 2. But then does that integrate well with Sam Kerr? But then where does that leave Fran Kirby? Way out on the wide right, And then you need a winger. You need a wing. So it's almost as if Chelsea have one too many great players, and the system doesn't allow all of them to fit in, and this is the only way to kind of get everybody in, and you then you have to then make it work. But then I feel like, and that's where it comes down to, right, you almost need to drop one of the big players and integrate maybe an Erin Cuthbert or someone like that who brings you the balance, and then that's how maybe the team has to work going forward. Because I think sooner rather than later, if that doesn't change this season, Arsenal 1-3-2, fine. City have an arguably better squad. They could do worse. Not even to mention when we get into the Champions League, what happens when you face another Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Lyon, or PSG, or one of those teams, or they could take more advantage of the spaces run. And the midfield battle is always the most important. I think G is fantastic. And years ago, when we used to see her playing as the sole number 10, she was the heartbeat of the team. Yeah, no better sight. But now I feel like there is a question of balance. Does she fit in? You got to pick. Do you want Harder? Do you want G? And then you've got to kind of decide from there. Or do you want to drop Kirby? You've got to decide between having the front 3, that is amazing, or you have G in there, and I guess that's what it comes down to. I think that's what I think. And if they want to make it work, they're going to have to make some balance changes.
It's a good problem to have, only if it works. That's kind of the both sides of that double-edged sword right there. Is there anyone else that we want to mention, Jessy, that had a good day out? I think we've talked about some of the maybe not so great days out, but anyone else that you want to mention? Yeah,
I mean, I'll just say again on G, I thought she was absolutely fantastic today, and I'd maybe doubted at points what her place in this Chelsea team was. But if there was anyone who, really shone today, I do think it was her for me. I thought Pernille Harder had a decent game. I thought there were like flashes of brilliance when Chelsea were able to get the ball to her, but they struggled to get the ball to her. And I think I will also say that I thought, for all that maybe Guru Reiten lacked defensively, when she got forward, I thought she was really, really dangerous. Some of the balls that, kind of reverse passes she was able to play to Harder were really impressive. There were those 2 crosses, that just went over Sam Kerr's head, kind of impossible to judge whether it was Kerr's jump or Reiten's cross. Given where each of them are in their pre-season, I would maybe suggest it was Kerr's jump at points. So I thought, she looked great and really dangerous as well. But other than that, there weren't loads of players who covered themselves in glory. And on a maybe slightly negative note, AKB had herself a couple of moments as well, which is never what you want to see at the start of the season. But there we go.
It's tough, yeah.
Just to add, I think in this specific game, G going forward, especially in moments in the first half and second half, brilliant, not a problem. But the thing is, it's because they had most of the ball. That's my whole point. When you have the ball, she is magnificent, but it's only in those defensive transitions and kind of the general overall look of the team going forward. That's where I think the problem lies. But in this game, hands down, she was one of the bright spots in midfield, and at least going forward creatively, she was absolutely magnificent. Just before everybody comes and hits me on Twitter, I'm not saying she's bad. I'm just saying in general. But this game, she was brilliant. That's it.
I would like to shout out. It's we're kind of talking about some of our standout performers. It sounds like Jessy's on the G train. Abdullah touched on Erin Cuthbert in great detail. I would just, for the sake of being different, touch on Pernilla Harder. I think when the going got tough in the second half, she showed real leadership quality to me, and I think you can never have enough of that in a team where it's like, all right, we're down. What are we going to do about it? Let's go. And you saw her kind of ginning up the team, especially when, Kerr B came on in the second half. They looked much better together. I think there were times where Beth England and Harder were in the same spots, or they could not connect a pass to save their lives. And there was just a clear difference in the second half. So I would just call her out. Obviously got a really bullet header, by the way, just absolutely smashed it. I was like, oh, wow. I thought it went over at first. I was like, oh, no, that's in the back of the net. So really great performance from her. I thought, she's going to have, much like Abdullah said in the season preview, a different role this year, and seems like a more integrated role in the squad. A quick note, now that we're going into season chances as we wrap this episode up, I'm going to read out the table. It's not going to read as well as we had hoped. I think when we talked last week, but just to put us in a position where we can talk about this, because we mentioned that the margins are so fine in this league. Chelsea, won the league by 2 points last year, something like that. So this is going to be difficult. But City, a resounding win against Everton. Maybe our Everton pick is going to be tougher this year than we thought. So they're first in the table, goal diff of 4. Brighton Hove Albion, goal diff of 2. They won, United won, and Arsenal won. That's your top 4. And so Villa and Spurs also won their matches this weekend. And then Chelsea leads the winless teams in 7th place with a -1 goal diff. Leicester City, Birmingham City, Reading, West Ham, and Everton kind of make up the first week of the table in the WSL. I guess before we get into how Chelsea can fare, are there any kind of standout moments from the week that you guys want to call out, or standout performances from any of the other teams?
I thought Manchester United were a lot better than I expected, but I'll still be intrigued to see them against a tougher team. And Manchester City, I feel like their result flattered them still a little bit, mainly because the conclusion I drew from this weekend was that Everton, as much as they've bought exciting players and it looked good on paper, still can't defend at all.
So Abdullah and I are in the mud on that one. That was tough. Abdullah, anything from you on the other teams that played?
I agree with Jessy. I think United, I think this surprised a few people with a good performance on Friday. But we'll have to see how they do over the season with Mark Skinner there and the rest of the team. City, yeah, I think Everton will take some time. So I think Everton were there for the taking in the first game. I didn't think it would be all peachy in game number 1. But I think Khadija Shaw is going to be a handful, come the rest of the season. She's clinical, so I think she'll have a good season.
Well, let's talk about Chelsea's performance as we kind of look at the table. We know that Everton and United are the next 2 matches, so and that it's just from a scheduling perspective a tough start to the season. That this is not an easy champions run through the bottom 6 before they play their first hard game type of scenario. So, faced Arsenal today, lost. Everton coming off a 4-0 loss may not be the finished article yet, but United maybe are better than we thought. When you project out the season, knowing the fine margins, guys, where do you think we go? I'll start with Abdullah.
It's tough. I think next couple of games, like we said, it's Everton and United, and I think those 2 teams, while Everton again need time to gel, you never know. a Valerie Gova header from somewhere could score the only goal of the game, and suddenly you're 1-0 down. United could turn up and produce something different because nobody's seen this new United team and what they can do. So I think Emma needs to balance tried and tested and new, and kind of bring in and kind of learn from the mistakes from today, and then kind of learn quickly and make some changes if she needs to. If she doesn't see the improvements from the current set of players, because I think she said that she wanted to trust the group of players that started at the end of last season. But if that doesn't keep working out, and if there are more mistakes and there are more holes that are being found, then I think she needs to make those changes quickly rather than wait a longer time and do it that way. Otherwise, then, like we said, fine margins. And if you lose a couple of these big games, you're like 3 steps behind.
Jessy, I guess thinking about the squad, right? We talked about, this was not probably the first choice 11 today, given, fitness and kind of coming back from preseason. How long do you think it's going to take Chelsea to get their first choice 11 fit and firing?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because of this fixture list. I think if you told me we had Birmingham next week or something, I'd feel better about how quick maybe people were able to get, rolling. As it is, obviously, Chelsea went and lost the Champions League final and then went and smashed Everton in the FA Cup the next week. So I feel like Everton are maybe unfortunate in getting the crap when Chelsea are pissed off, basically. So I do feel quite good about next weekend. Obviously, then there's an international break, which is frustrating because you lose all your players again, and then it's Man United after that. I guess the benefit for the international break is those players, they will still be playing off their holiday. They will still be getting match fitness, just obviously not at Cobham. So I thought, like Kerr and Kirby had flashes of looking pretty good, if not totally sharp when they came on at least. So I don't think it'll take long to roll into maybe more traditional Chelsea vibes. It's just unfortunate that the games are hard at first, but we move. The one thing I'll just add as well is that I do think a strong Arsenal can also maybe benefit Chelsea at points. Like we talk about, the league coming down to 4 games, and it's frustrating because Chelsea have lost the first one of those. But, City comprehensively beat Arsenal twice last year. And if Arsenal can take points off City, that can work in Chelsea's favour as well. So, I think there's interesting things to take away from today in the wider league context beyond just thinking about, oh, fuck, Chelsea lost.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Just as we really finish out, we know it's going to be there's ground to make up now, right? Which is in this league is not easy to do. Everton coming up next week. Abdullah, I'm going to let you read the stat line here because I think it says all we need to potentially say about this Everton team. Although they are potentially improved with personnel, do not necessarily play well against the top 3.
Yeah, so kind of last season, Everton against the big 3, they had 0.17 goals per game. They conceded 3.5 goals a game. Their XG4 per game was 0.41. Their XG against was 2.41, and their points per game was 0. In comparison to other teams, they had 2.4 goals per game. They had conceded 0.81 goals per game. They had an XG4 of 1.7. They had an XG against of 0.86, and they had 2 get points per game. So there's a huge improvement against the rest of the league. But then when it comes to the big 3, they just cannot score. They concede a lot, almost 3.5 goals a game. I mean, that's almost 4 goals a game. And there's no quality chances in there, with 0.4 XG. And then they're conceding huge chances. So, I mean, like Jessy said, it's unlucky that Everton have to be the ones to face a pissed off Chelsea. But it looks like it's a trend. Let's see. Hopefully they're looking to change it this season, but a second week, I don't know if that's possible. So we'll see.
Well, let's just hope that we get off to a better start next week. And I think for me anyway, the beginning of the season is going to have to be where Chelsea kind of begin to make up some ground. We just know if City go on a cruise the rest of the year, it's going to be really hard to catch them. So the pressure is now on the rest of these the 3 matches that Jessy was referencing to get a result in those games, and just hope that maybe City and Arsenal split, or they draw both times, or anything like that. So is there anything else you guys want to cover from this one? I know we're an hour in, and we've covered a lot, but anything else from a notes perspective that you're looking forward to?
I think I will just say is that I could tell that, like coming away from the game, lots of people felt rubbish about it. And I do understand that. But I also think Arsenal did look really good. And that's not necessarily a positive as stuff goes. But I think also that means that Chelsea looked pretty decent for large portions of it too. And I think it's easy, when we have done so well over the past couple of seasons, to kind of walk away from that game and be really frustrated because we're so used to winning because we are so good. But I don't think this is necessarily showing a massive drop off as much as it is showing Arsenal's massive step up. As I say, across the entire league season, that still might not be a great thing. But when you're thinking about your own house, I think against lots of other teams, Chelsea would have breezed through this game, even with all the issues we've touched on.
Abdullah?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I tweeted during the game saying that Chelsea weren't necessarily outplayed. It's just that Arsenal were clinical and they finished off their chances. And I think this Arsenal team they've looked better than they did under Joe Montemurro already in this first game. I felt like there were flashes of play that I felt were so much better. Their transitions were better. And the credit to them, Jonas Andoval's come in and he's made an impact immediately. And I think the fact that Chelsea were able to compete for large portions of the game, like Jessy said, it just, if anything, that shows the potential and the flashes of brilliance that this Chelsea team can produce against the big teams in the rest of the season. Because if this Arsenal team ends up taking points off City and other teams late in the season, you can look back at the performance here and say, well, you know what, in large patches this team did well and they matched them, and if not, did better at times. So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Well, look, we're gonna go get them next week. That's the end of that. No more shenanigans for this Chelsea women's team the rest of the season. I'm pretty sure that'll happen. And look, the advanced coverage of the team this year is going to be really great for everybody. I think we touched on this in the season preview. The fact that it's on Sky now and that you have Kaz Carney doing some of the commentaries is wonderful. She's amazing. So this is all a good thing, and we hope that you're able to tune into this team as much as humanly possible this year. They're getting simulcast on NBC in the States, so that's another good thing. It's exactly where you're picking up Chelsea for the Premier League, so shouldn't be a huge transition for you to just click on over one button like it was this morning. And look, I think we're still very excited for the season, even though it was off to a bit of a rough start. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.